Welcome to Sound Leadership with DJ, the podcast that dives deep into the world of leadership. If you're passionate about learning from the brightest minds in the field of healthcare and in the field of leadership, you've come to the right place. In each episode, we embark on an inspiring journey of a successful leader, unraveling their secrets behind their accomplishments, from their early beginnings to their current roles. We explore the unique paths they've traveled to reach their present status. We dive into their biggest challenges and learn from their pivotal lessons they've had along the way. We also will seek to get tips for inspiring leaders from our guests. So today, our special guest is none other than Nena Hart, the CEO of Hart Healthcare Solutions. Nena brings a wealth of experience to the table, having served as a director of nursing and long-term care for over 2 years, as well as holding various positions such as hospice director of operations, area vice president of operations, and national utilization manager. Currently, she works as a post-acute compliance and operations consultant. She's here to share her experience in various areas of the healthcare field. Throughout our conversations, Nina will shed light on the unique challenges and opportunities that healthcare leaders encounter. Her vast experiences promise to bring a fresh and valuable perspective to our discussion as we explore the qualities, the strategies, and approaches that make her a successful leader. So join us as we dive into the art of leadership with Nina. So regardless of whether you're a new leader or a leader who just wants to sharpen their skills, this episode promises to have something for you. We want you to stay connected with us and receive all the updates, and we've got you covered. Join our thriving community by liking and following and engaging in our social media pages on LinkedIn and YouTube. But that's not all. We also have other ways for you to stay connected. So whether you're a fan of Apple Music or Alexa or before iHeartRadio, we've got you covered with your favorite platform. Simply say, "Hey Alexa, play Sound Leadership with DJ," and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. We're here to learn from Nina. She's an insightful leader, and she's here to provide motivation and encouragement to all leaders out there. So buckle up and be prepared to be inspired, motivated, and empowered to become your best self. Welcome, Nina. How you
Hey,
doing?
DJ. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm really glad to be here with you.
Listen, I am doing this live today, so I usually have my edit buttons and I usually have my applauses and my sound effects already. So you're gonna have to give me a second because we have to applaud you for coming on
Woo!
to yeah. We're gonna applaud you for coming on the Sound Leader Show, right?
Nice.
So we're doing this live where I usually record, so anything can happen. I don't know what Nina's gonna say, and she don't know what I'm gonna say. So we're gonna just dive into it. So, Nina, I
Let's do
did that
it.
introduction, but it really holds nothing to who you really are. Um, you know, I think I've touched on your experiences and who you are, but won't you give us who you are in your own words?
Okay. I am a CNA at heart. I started healthcare at 18 in long term care as a CNA. I've always been a kind of disruptor. I immediately just saw things that I wanted to fix. I love to fix problems. I live in Hawaii with my husband and my 4 children. I'm a mom, I'm a nurse, I'm an entrepreneur. I started my own consulting company to try and help organizations be their best possible selves and their employees really take ownership and accountability and try to improve the culture and the operations of post acute care as a whole. So that's a snapshot.
Well, that's a lot. So, uh, this is obviously a leadership podcast, but we were talking before we went live, and one of the things that we chatted about in the past, and now, right, is leaders have to continue to learn. And before we dive deep into the podcast, I think you embody that. You really believe in that philosophy. So, tell us about what you just accomplished. I see some extra initials behind your name.
I just finished. I don't even have the paper in my hand. I got the official email that I'm done, so I'm putting it everywhere. I just finished my PhD in natural medicine. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I've always wanted to have those letters, and they mean a
Yes.
lot to me. Just to
Yes.
show that really excellence is what I'm pursuing in every area of my life, and so I'm excited to be doing something new and different. To have learned some really amazing things. So it was a great experience.
Wow. And in leadership, right? As we start to dive into this podcast, is leaders must be willing to learn. Leaders must be willing to grow. So, what is your philosophy on learning and growing? Obviously, you've obtained your PhD, which is a terminal degree. But talk to us about what you believe leaders should be striving for.
I love this question because throughout my leadership career, what I learned was not always fun to learn. Learning about natural medicine and learning about leadership in my master's in administration was learning about concepts and learning about leadership. But when you're actually in leadership roles, learning to listen and learning to communicate are probably more important than professional development or um, continuing education in a lot of ways. And a lot of my leadership lessons were about myself and how I treated others and how I interacted with patients and families to get the responses that I was getting from them. Lot of growth happening because of that, and usually not always pleasant
Yeah,
to face yourself and say I could have done better in that situation, and here's what I learned. I won't do
yeah,
that again. So that's the kind of education that I've gotten throughout the last 15 years of leadership is a lot of personal growth
yes.
through that.
And that's what's important about leadership, right? We must be willing to self-reflect and grow both professionally and personally. We can't lead others if we're not willing to accept change. Leaders must be willing to accept change. And I think that as the pandemic has taught us, we're going to have to adapt whether we want to or not, right?
Yeah. I think one of my fatal flaws that almost really negatively impacted my life in a leadership role and my personal relationships in my marriage specifically is that I tried to keep my personal life and my professional life very separate. And I would try to keep those boundaries, but then they started to really bleed, and I lost priority over what was really important, and it affected my career, it affected my marriage, and I had to really pivot and say like, what is really important to me here, and how is this impacting everything that's happening around me? And so that was
Wow.
a big learning curve for me to say, you can't keep it separate, but you
Yeah.
can't let it overlap either. You have to find that balance where leadership is part of you and who you are, but also you keep your priorities in place so that you can have that those important relationships in your life and have that away from work feeling without um, being working all the time.
Yes. Yes. And I dived right in because I was excited to see the PhD by your name. But I always start with this question, right? How did you get into leadership? And like I said, I dive right in because that beautiful set of initials after your name. But let's talk about the early beginnings. How did you get into leadership?
I started as a CNA and then I got my LPN, and I was working at a facility, and it was a beautiful facility, but it was like um, still kind of a mess. And I just came home one day and I told my husband like, I'm gonna be the DON here, and I'm gonna run this place better. Um, I'm gonna get my RN and I'm gonna be the DON, director of nursing, and I'm gonna fix these problems. Lofty goal, right? Not exactly realistic goal, but that's what I thought. And that's probably what a lot of the people who work on our team think. Well, I could do a better job than you are, right? And so I learned pretty quick that that was not the case. And that is
Yes.
how I fell face first into leadership.
Wow. And I'll say that's how I got into leadership, right? Because I was looking up like I can do it better. I'm gonna go
Uh huh.
I was a CNA just like you, then LP and RN, and I was drawn into leadership because I thought I can do a better job, right?
Right.
And what do you feel you've learned, right? You start off as a CNA, and then like you said, you strive to be that DON. Once you became that DON, how was that, right? Did you look back at yourself and say, I had no idea what I was talking about, and
Yes.
that person was actually doing a great job, or what was that transition like, right?
Yes. I definitely learned that. that person was doing a great job, and I learned that as we're implementing processes and policies and regulations and still trying to be people and have relationships with our patients, as a leader, it's really hard to find that middle ground where you're supporting your staff, but you're not being a friend and letting things happen that shouldn't happen. You're providing education, but you're also having that relational standpoint and also having that discipline standpoint when you need to. So I really learned why leaders reacted the way that they did in a lot of situations where I thought I wouldn't have responded that way. I would have just told them like it was, right? So learning to shut up a
Every
lot of
time.
the time and listen and not respond, and um, learning when to speak up, what to speak up about, what is this the hill I want to die on type of deal, because I'm a relatively outspoken person and I like to
Mhm.
put it out there. And I really had to learn like how to connect with people. And sometimes, you push people away when you're too direct and they can't handle it that way.
Yes.
So I learned so much stepping into that DON role. I learned that it all falls on you. My first building
Yes.
caught on fire, literally was on
Wow.
fire in the middle of the night. They called me and they said, Nina, the vent above the nurse's station is on fire and there's flames falling down on the desk. And we've had to evacuate the residents. And I'm driving to the facility, and I'm like, I have no idea what to do. I'm a brand new DON. So just those experiences are how you learn. Um, those
Wow.
that trial by fire is how
Seriously,
we learn.
that was trial by fire, but in that moment, you had to display leadership.
Yeah.
You had never gone through it, but I'm sure you led your team through a successful fire for what it's worth, for whatever a
Yeah.
successful fire could be. So,
Yep.
we as leaders perform under stress. How do you handle stress as a leader and empower your team to walk through it, burning building or whatever that may be? But how do you empower your team to walk through it during a stressful time?
I think being that support, offering that help, whenever I could, I would offer to pitch in. I know that sometimes staff think, well, I just need another person, I need another body, and that's not always true. But the offer to say, what can I do to help you, helps them realize sometimes, like, actually, I've got this. If I have a question, will you be there? Yeah, absolutely. And then you be there for that question. And I would take a lot of the administrative things in those situations that I could. So if the nurses, we had to call every single family, we had to evacuate those residents to another facility or to our emergency location. And we had to call all those families, we had to call all those places, we had to send all those records and all the meds and try to get everything we could with those residents that were evacuated. So, you know, those are the type of things that I would really try to say, okay, well, what can I do? Well, I'm calling this family, and I'll say, okay, who can I call? Um, so trying to be that servant leader, it's hard, but
Yeah.
that's, I would say,
Yes.
always my goal. And I seem to function really well under high stress. I don't know what the deal is with that or how that's the strength that I got, but
Yes.
that's just very high functioning. The more there is to do, it seems like the more productive I am. So,
Yes.
that's just one of my administration gifts, I guess.
Wow. And that's inspiring, right? To hear somebody say, I function well under stress, right? Because we've all worked for the leaders who they panic under stress, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and when we're leading a team, our team look for us to be the leader, not
Yeah.
for us to be cowering behind the desk or panicking. Because when we panic, they panic. And when the team who's servicing our residents, our members, our patients, our whatever you call them, clients, right? When they panic, well, the the residents, the patients, the clients will panic, and they will see
Yeah.
that. And what outcomes should we expect if our team is running around panic, right? So you have to have effective communication skills. And I think leaders have to understand that effective communication skills is key. How have you utilize effective communication skills such as active listening and things? How have you utilized that?
Well, that is a great question. I'm actually speaking at the National Association for Directors of Nursing in Orlando in a week.
Small plug. When is that?
That is on the 25th. And I'm speaking on communication for culture and how leaders, literally, that's my topic. That's the topic I chose.
Would have known.
Glutton for punishment, right? But that is for leaders to understand that we set the tone for our facility, for our branch, for our agency, for our company, of how we communicate when we send out an email that's short or that's unclear and then are unhappy with the response or the results, understanding and taking accountability. Most of the leaders I know are really high accountability, high performers, and they want to improve, but they have to slow down and take the time to go back and say, okay, where did this go wrong? And a lot of the times communication is at the root of that.
Yeah, I think that's important. Is exactly what you're saying, right? Communication is at the root of it. I shameless plug. Have produced an ebook on leadership, and one of the
Yes.
topics or chapters that I focus on is active listening. Active listening is not just sitting there and typing on the computer while somebody talks to you, right? It's not when your team member walks into the office and you're like, "Yeah, tell me about your day." Yeah, just 1 second. No, that's not active listening, and that's not leadership.
Right.
Leaders have to lead by example. So when somebody walks into my office, and I'm sure the same with you, right? I stop what I'm doing and I give them my full attention
Yeah.
because I believe that that's how we're going to continue to inspire and motivate others. But what I'm really tapping into is really giving that person my undivided attention and allowing them to speak freely and have that
I
that
love
that
it.
ability to tell me exactly what it is they're feeling, so I can tap into their feelings and really help them move the process forward.
One thing I noticed is that with my active listening, I was trying to speak enough that I was maybe convincing the other person to see things my way. And I read or I listened to the audiobook of Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Have you ever heard of that book or read that book?
On my way moving to Hawaii, I have
Yeah.
negotiation book.
I loved that book.
Yeah.
And my
Yes.
husband and I have had so many conversations about how using tactics like mirroring, just saying what they said back to you,
Yeah.
especially when they say, when you get somebody coming in hot, you open the door,
Yeah.
you're here to active listen, and they say, you did this. And you
Yeah.
say, I did that? I
Yes.
did? And they say, well, did you? And you're like, no. Or why are you perceiving it that way? Can you tell
Yeah.
me more? And just asking those open-ended questions instead of saying something like, I didn't do that, you're making assumptions, that's not true. I used to be very defensive and try to protect myself from
Yes.
conversations gone wrong or accusations from families. I never said that, I would never do that. And that didn't actually do me any good at all. Using those communication tactics and trying to listen to the other person and what they're really saying and feeling and letting them have the floor instead of me was probably one of the most effective strategies I've ever used, communicating.
And what you stated, and I talked about it a little bit, but right, letting people express their feelings. So, as a leader, what role does emotional intelligence play in leadership?
Oh, it's huge. It's what 75 to 90% of leadership is emotional intelligence and
Yeah.
social emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And um, really seeing where these feelings are coming from and how we respond to other people's feelings. Do we take those feelings on ourselves? um,
Yes.
how do we react to those feelings? And I think staff need to be allowed to feel, and sometimes we try to compartmentalize that, especially as nurses. I can't feel this right now. And
Hmm.
then those things end up coming out a lot later. Those things end up coming out. And the same thing with that culture I was talking about, especially in long term care and hospice. You've got a heavy burden of work to do, you've got a heavy burden of feelings to feel that you can't feel at work while you're working. Your patients are dying. You're working short. your family members are upset and highly emotional.
Yes.
And so, you're dealing with a lot of really high cycling, high stress, high emotion situations that as nurses, we don't let any emotion into. So that's coming out some way somewhere, and
Yes.
I think we really need to make room for that, make space for that. And hospice is really good about that. A lot of hospices that I've worked with and worked for did debriefing after a traumatic death or a situation. They have support for staff members as well as families, for bereavement. But those debriefing sessions, when we did in long-term care, when we had a complaint or a survey or abuse allegation or something happened that was very high stress and had a high emotional response, or had, even if it's just two people that are really have headbutting, um, after it's kind of happened, having that debriefing session is so helpful.
I agree 110%. And, as leaders, right, sometimes we are involved in that debriefing session. Sometimes others are leading a debriefing
Yeah,
session. I think what leaders have to remember is that you don't always have to lead.
right,
You can lead from the sidelines. So, as I work with leaders, I try to teach them that, just because you're the leader doesn't always mean you have to be at the front of the line.
right. And
So,
sometimes you're not the best person for the job.
yes, and we must be honest with ourselves,
Yeah.
right? We have to be honest with ourselves. So, as you've grown and shaped and molded to become a better leader, can you tell us about a time that you maybe made a bad call as a leader and what you learned from that?
I the one thing that just came to mind immediately was I closed an investigation waiting on one statement. I had a nurse who left and went on vacation, and we have to close those investigations timely, and so I was still waiting on her statement. I couldn't get her to email it in. I couldn't get her to give it to me. I couldn't reach her over the phone, and I'm like, I got to close this out. And this was probably at my second building that I was ever a DON at, so I was still pretty young DON, but I had a really strong VP of clinical who really supported me. And she, said, make sure you get all the statements together. And I said, okay, I've got them all. But I really wasn't thinking, I don't actually have them all. There's a nurse who's not here. Right.
Yes.
So I overlooked that. And when I got that statement from her, when she came back in 2 days, it changed the entire investigation. We ended up
Wow.
having to call the police. Like, it was
Wow.
really uh, oversight on my part to not
Yes.
think that that was as important as it was. And so, you don't know what you don't know. It's the black swan, right? But I learned that, um, it's really important in those cases to have all the information you can have,
Yes.
and to not think, well, I'll get to that later. Because sometimes when you get to it later, it's too late. And sometimes when you get to it later, you realize you have made a misstep, or someone else has a negative outcome because of something you did as a leader. I've made many mistakes as a leader, and really try to understand how decisions I made affected my staff. But we don't know how things are going to happen, so we have to be really, um, aware and
Yes.
thorough. And I learned a lot from that. I actually, um, had a conversation with my VP of clinical after that, and she was very kind and understanding. But I was really upset that I did. I was pretty hard on myself that I did that. And so, that's one of those situations where you're like, I learned a lot from that I can't just breeze through things that I think I know, because I
Yeah.
thought I knew. I thought I knew exactly what happened. I thought I had all the information to make the decision to move forward. And then once I realized I did not have that information and I saw what the new information was, I realized that I
Yes.
had did not make the right decision.
Wow. But
Yeah.
I bet you've learned from that and
Oh
you
yeah.
haven't made that mistake again, right?
I didn't do that again.
And that's what leadership is, right? As we started this
Yeah.
conversation, it is a continuous learning journey, and we
Right.
will make mistakes. Leaders are not perfect. We're far from perfect, right?
Right.
And one of the things I pride myself on, and I'm sure you do, is I love to surround myself with people who are smarter than me, brighter than me, and have a different subject matter experience and expertise than I do.
Absolutely.
I believe that's how I'm going to succeed and be
Right.
that leader that others need us to be, right? So,
Yep. I
um,
agree.
as 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 you know, some leaders don't think like that, right? They think that
Yeah.
if I hire somebody who has maybe a PhD after their name or MSc after their name, they're going to take my job,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's not like that. So, as a leader, how do you surround yourself with like-minded people who are not afraid to challenge you and challenge the status quo, but know you're the leader, right? So, they're not afraid to say, you know what, Nina, I don't think that's it's not good, right? But how do you empower your team to speak up when they need to?
I think, you know, um, they watch how you interact with other people and they know when it's safe and when it's not safe to deal with
Yeah.
leaders. I have talked to so many nurses who I said, have you talked to your supervisor about that? Or have you talked to your DON about that? And they're like, I would rather quit. I'll quit
Yes.
now. And I'm like,
Yes. Yes.
you won't bring a concern to your immediate manager about something that's a real problem that is going to eventually cause 20 other nurses to quit, even if you hold out. And they would rather just quit or be miserable than bring one concern to their leadership or management team because they have been so um, just downtrodden by very poor management. And I think the at the DON level, at the clinical manager level, at the director level,
Yeah.
I see such small mindedness. And I have been in the position where I was the small minded one and had to
Yeah.
learn and had to listen. But it's really sad for our healthcare system, for our patients, for the culture of our facilities. And I noticed that a lot of organizations don't want to deal with that. And that's also really sad that we have these toxic leaders in place who will not hear um, the concerns of their staff or who are not willing to have those hard conversations and because they don't want to know um,
Yes.
or they just don't want to deal with it or this is just the way it is, right? We can't change this. And I don't know if there is one person in healthcare who hasn't seen all the data, all the studies, all the posts, all the stats, all the things that are coming out about um, not just nurses, CNAs and maintenance and housekeeping and middle management, clinical leadership, supervisors, on call. No one's wanting to do these jobs anymore. And a lot of these closed-minded managers and also organizations who are not willing to change what they're doing when they have really stupid policies for lack of a better way to put it. Some of our policies are stupid and some of our policies chase away our staff and some of our policies um, were created 20 years ago and are no longer current and have never been changed just because that's the way we've always done it, and that is killing our facilities and our leaders and our floor staff.
You, you talk about culture, and I don't think leaders understand they greatly influence the culture, right? What do they say? We have a high turnover, and I don't know why. Well, did we start at the top, right? Because it trickled down from the top, right? And I
Yeah.
don't think people realize that. You go into some of these facilities, right? You're a healthcare consultant, and you deal with companies who are spending thousands on recruitment and
Hundreds
retention.
of thousands.
Don't let me correct. Hundreds of thousands on recruitment and retention, and they won't fix the monster in the office.
Yeah. The reason people are quitting or the reason people can't get through the application process. I've
Yeah.
seen application processes, you're like, why can't we hire? Why can't we get hired? Because your
Yes.
DON hasn't called one of these 45 applicants. That's why. When I sit down with the leaders and I'm
Yes.
peer to peer, I'm not your supervisor. I'm here to help you. And I ask them what the issues are that I can help with. And they
Hmm.
say, well, this nurse has been here for 10 years and is ruining this facility and does this and bullies. And I'm like, why is this person still here? What have you done about it? Nothing. They're just here. And it's like, well, you take ownership of the culture of this facility. And
Yes.
if you do nothing, then nothing is done, and all your nurses around this person are leaving. How many nurses have quit because of her? Oh, 17. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
the longer you put this off, well, the DON's afraid of her. She's
Yeah.
been there for 30 years, right? You've
Yes.
got these people who And the DON hasn't attempted to coach them at all. I'm not saying fire every person who doesn't have a good attitude or who's harsh or who doesn't know how to deal with people, because they may have some other amazing skills they bring to the table. And they may have been there for 30 years and truly do know more than anybody else there. But this is where we as leaders have to figure out how to lift them up and raise them up and help them be a better teammate. And if we don't do that, that's on us, not on them. We let that bad apple spoil the whole bunch instead of setting targeted meetings and targeted goals with that person and saying, how are we moving along in this area? Okay, here's a concern I had. Do we need to facilitate a conversation? And like just head on dealing with these toxic issues
Yes.
is really the only way to save our culture.
I've helped so many, and I've walked into so many buildings similar to what you've just stated. And when you ask why haven't we got rid of so and so, well, there's nobody applying. Well, but even if nobody's applying, if you're still losing people, you're starting to go into the negative. You should lose that bad apple and keep the staff who are working and things are working well versus having them run off people, right? And as long as we allow it to continue, the culture will never change.
It shouldn't be an if then situation. If I had applicants, then I'd fire, then I'd
Yeah.
deal with this issue. If I had more staff, if I had better pay rates, then I would deal with this issue. If, it's like, if I was drowning, then you would help me. But if I'm just out in the ocean floating, or if I'm over here hurting people, then you
Yeah.
won't deal with me, right? So it's like it shouldn't be an if then type of situation that we deal with issues that need to be dealt with.
Yes.
We've got to start addressing these issues sooner. I was just having a conversation with an organization who's got 9 different locations, and um, their CEO asked me a question. He said, what got you into compliance? And I said, well, I guess I've always been in compliance my entire career, because what started to happen is I saw how it affected every piece of business.
Yes.
And, you know, um, when we don't deal with issues, when we don't have that communication that you're talking about, and that open communication, we don't know where we're non compliant. We don't know where our risks are. And it starts to affect every piece of the
Yeah.
organization. It affects everything.
Wow. Nina, you brought a wealth of knowledge to the podcast, and I love your approach to leadership. What tips would you give to inspiring leaders who want to tip their feet into leadership, but they're scared? Other leaders are running them off. They don't know if they're going to be a good leader, not a leader at all. What tips could you give to those kind of people?
I would say it's very likely that if you want to be a leader, you already are a leader. So, a leadership is not our title or our role. You can be a leader right now in the role that you're in and step up and be a positive influence, be a positive effect on your culture. And I would say um, to existing leaders who really want to improve, you know, I've really learned the last couple years to do less. I know we get caught up in doing more and more and more audits, more hours, more research, more just more, right? And sometimes more is just more. More is just heavier. It's more to carry. Doing less and really focusing on what's important, which would be relationships, people, and patience.
Yeah.
That's what's
Oh, I like
important.
that.
That moves everything forward, right? Um, if you need to ask for help, then you have the support to do that because you have good relationships, right? So if you're not getting your work done, I hear this as the pushback to that is, I don't have time to be talking to people, be calling families, be out on the
Mhm.
floor. I don't have time to be talking to patients every day. I don't have time to be, um, reviewing every report every morning. I totally
Yes.
get that. Um, and those are things that you either need to delegate out or figure out who needs to be doing this and what needs to be done. But being in your office with the door shut and being in that mode of like overwhelm and stress is not helping move you forward. You could spend, I tell DONs and hospice leaders, if you spent the night here, would you get all your work done? No, right? You still have to say, where do I need to move the impact? What are my priorities? And I really think that prioritizing is super important,
Wow.
to really maintain sanity and do the best job, and maintain relationships too.
Wow. Well, Nina, thank you for coming on this podcast. Before we wrap this podcast up, I always love to highlight people who are doing excellent things, and you're doing excellent things, right?
Thank
Uh,
you.
you run your own organization. Tell us about your organization and how people can get in contact with you.
Awesome. Thank you. I will. My organization is Hart Healthcare Solutions. I am a post acute consultant, so I do a lot of compliance and quality, and operations efficiency, a lot of staffing and troubleshooting with systems and processes. So I work primarily with hospice and home care organizations. But I also have an extensive experience in long term care. So I love to do education. I am a CE provider, so I like to do webinars and workshops. I like to create courses. I love finding those gaps where that knowledge deficit is really impacting um, the whole facility or the whole agency because they don't know what they don't know. Um, so yeah, that's really what I do.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
And I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. That was my LinkedIn page you just showed, and that's a
yes.
great place. It's just LinkedIn, Nena Hart. And so I'd love to connect with you, and feel free to message me and say hello.
Is there a website or something if they want to give you a call, or what's the
Yeah,
best way to
absolutely.
contact you?
HeartHealthCareSolutions.com is the website. They can find all of my services on there. I've got courses for leaders, for directors
Wow.
of nursing. I've
Wow.
got forms packages. I just finished a policy and procedure manual for home care and palliative care. So, a lot of materials coming out for post acute providers. And they can connect with me there. And I can also be reached at my email, nina@hearthealthcaresolutions.com. And I'd love to connect.
Wow. Well, Nina, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I can't say enough about you. I can't say enough about your organization and about your leadership skills. So I thank you. And I thank the viewers for joining us here on Sound Leadership with DJ. We hope that you gain valuable insights from Nina. If you've enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to like and follow us on all of our social media page for more great content. You can find us on YouTube and LinkedIn at Sound Leadership with DJ. Also, don't forget, tune in to our podcast on your favorite platform, including Apple Music, Alexa, iHeartRadio, and so much more. Simply say, play Sound Leadership with DJ. And when you get that episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can always be up to date on our latest episodes. Remember, leadership is a journey, not a destination. Keep striving to learn and grow and never give up on your goals. From everyone here at Sound Leadership with DJ, we wish you all the best on your leadership journey, and we look forward to having you join us again for more great information and more great discussion on Sound Leadership with DJ. How was that? I think it still has you on mute. You got to unmute. It mutes us.
Awesome. Do you want to end the live stream?
Yeah, it ended.
Mine still says live on my end.
It's a delay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's
Awesome.
ended.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, yeah, it went well. Hold on, let me try to fix my thing. I hate Oh, let me stop my share first. That will make sense if I stop this share.
Yeah,
Let me
there's a
see.
little red box in the top corner that says live.
Should not. Let me hit. I'm gonna leave this. Let me leave.
Okay,
I'll leave. I'll give you a call just in case.
sounds good.
All right. Bye.